You're listening Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. This is one of those This is one of those days that it's going to be a strange conversation, to say the least. And I'm looking forward to jumping into this with a lot of you guys here. Some of you already reaching out to me before the show even started off, and we're starting exactly where you think we are. Much like last Monday, I have conversations planned about farming bankruptcies and gas prices and so many other factors that are contributing to our way of life every single day or will be soon. And a shout out to everybody who's joining us across all platforms here. I appreciate you guys being here, whether it be TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, or of course through the WHBY lines here terrestrially. You're all welcomed. And if you're listening later today on Political Voices Network, that's absolutely awesome as well. Our little neck of the woods has been thrust into the spotlight again here in the world of politics, and I am kind of obligated to jump into this in an appropriate way. If you have not heard, the owner of the Minocqua Brewing Company and person who has been in the news for the last essentially week and a half since the assassination attempt on the president, has officially announced that he is joining the race for governor here in Wisconsin, which, as somebody who's an advocate for democracy, I'm absolutely in favor of from that perspective. Anybody who thinks they have a chance to run and thinks they can do something about that should absolutely take the time to go ahead and try to run. Far be it from me to tell people who can and can't run. Now, how hit me up on the text line before the show even started, and I'd like to read it here because I think it's worth it. And Ali says his TikTok videos are popping up on her For You page because I'm in them, which, yeah, exactly. And as everyone knows, and that's kind of what we're going to be getting into here, Hal said, Ben, you have never been shy of promoting your many side hustles. One of them is your Substack for Minocqua Brewing Company with Kirk Bankstad's entry in the race. I think you need to address how this will affect your coverage of the governor's race, which, Hal, because great minds think alike, and he listens to this show regularly, probably could anticipate that that was exactly where I was going to start, because I think that's important. And not to make the story about myself, but if you're a regular listener in this neck of the woods, then you know that I have a partnership with the Minocqua Brewing Company. As Ali highlights, I do 2 podcasts with them a week that are available on social media, as well as I write an article a week for his Minocqua Brewing Substack. Now, for those of you that don't read it, I can tell you guys that in the tenure that I have been working with him, you will never find any content on that website that I wouldn't be more than comfortable saying to you guys right here. In fact, I got a handful of texts and emails from him saying that I have to lighten up on the Democrats. Some of them are good. They can't all be bad, right? And yes, they can all be bad. Welcome to the show. All of that being said, though, I think it's important for me to say this before I get into the actual matter of him running. I have removed myself from the Minocqua Brewing Times. I will not be writing going forward until this candidacy is over. As far as I'm aware, you won't be seeing me on any of the podcasts. I may still show up on WCPT 820 in Chicago, but in terms of the actual Minocqua related stuff, I am taking a I'm taking a back seat to all of that. I have no intention of getting involved with that. And more importantly, I don't want the work that I do to be seen as an endorsement for anybody in the race as it stands today. So allow me to remove any kind of ambiguity in that in this sentence here going forward. I will not be endorsing this candidate, and my work will not be viewed as an endorsement on this candidate either. I will no longer, starting as recently as tomorrow, you will be seeing somebody different writing the Tuesday article instead of me. I wrote for him as recently as last Tuesday. I personally wasn't going to leave as a result of the comments made about the president, because as I highlighted on and off throughout all of last week, I the president has talked about me and people that think like me the exact same way that Kirk had written about him. I am not going to sit here and pretend that the violent rhetoric is coming from one direction, and I did not see a reason to leave. But I'm telling you right now, a week later, that I am no longer affiliated and reserve the right to be affiliated again when the race is over, but I have no interest in being viewed as an any kind of endorsement of his candidacy through my work. As I stated before, anybody's allowed to run. I do question this. David says, "Yeah, I appreciate what you guys are saying, and if I wanted to do this job to make money, I would have just stayed in sales. My credibility is very important to me, and I oftentimes brag to you guys that I think there's very few people in talk radio that take this job as seriously as I do, that go out of their way not only to inform you, but highlight the ways in which other people are paid to misinform you. And if it ever looked like I were one of those kind of people, then it's going to be an issue here going forward. So please don't take this the wrong way here or try and read between the lines here. This is an amicable parting of ways. I am doing it for my own professionalism. Um, and I think it's worth highlighting here. And moreover, if I may say, I am frustrated with the announcement because if you don't read Kirk's newsletter, they are very much in the vein of, Donald Trump's threat to democracy. Is he going to count the election results in November, so on and so forth? Whereas I am much more of the mindset, just run on actual fixes for affordability, healthcare, and housing, and the votes will follow. You don't need to worry about somebody trying to steal an election when they obviously lose the election. For him to come out and attack all of the Democratic candidates in that kind of way, in a way that I would argue the Democratic primary in Wisconsin has been fairly amicable up until this moment, it's very frustrating for me. Francesca Hong is going to be the first gubernatorial candidate on this show. She will be on Friday, and I do not like the position that he is putting this conversation in as somebody who views progressive politics as a way to pull us out of this kind of scenario here. Someone's asking, yeah, the show's like dominoes, just Cominos with a C. I do not like it. Honest to God, it almost felt Trumpian the way that he announced himself in this presidency or in this gubernatorial race here, just a few days after the FBI was questioning him. You will never hear me state that what the Republican Party was doing to the Minocqua Brewing Company and Kirk Bangstad himself in Oneida County wasn't a giant pile of horse crap. He was very obviously targeted for his liberal beliefs. That being said, if you actually believe the way that he does, that Donald Trump is somehow a unique threat to democracy, that we're going to need somebody to take care of and to hit the ground running like that at a time when I would argue there are progressive candidates that are really starting to gain some traction in Wisconsin here, I have some issues with that. I just simply do. You can come into the race and announce you're running in a way that isn't going to do detrimental harm to campaigns going forward. And I knew going into this, and I see I have a caller. I'm going to bring you on in a second here. I knew that was like this race was going to get awkward in a good way for a lot of people. I was looking forward to be working in Wisconsin at a time when we could have a conversation about the difference between blue MAGA and progressivism, between what the future of this state can look like versus what the future of this state kind of looks like as it stands today. This is going to be the first drop in that here, and it's obviously impacting me professionally as well as financially. But I can state unequivocally that I officially have no ties whatsoever with that publication, and it will not in any way impact my ability to talk about this the right way. That being said, he will be invited on my show, assuming he stays in the race long enough, to break down what his actual platform is outside of free beer the day the president passes. And I am looking forward to that conversation. I do appreciate the opportunity that he gave me to speak to a much larger audience than the one that I get here. And it probably is going to set me backwards professionally to do this. But I think long term, this is the right move to go forward. So I wanted to lay this out there. And I want your opinions as well, not about me, but about the announcement in general that he's running. I see we have our first call of the day here, so we're going to get this on, and we'll keep the conversation rolling from there. But what do you think about this recent announcement here? Let's get this first caller on the air. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, it's Anna. I'll start by just saying thank you for your transparency on this. I think it's really important that your listeners know, where you stand and that you are going to, remain clear and honest in your coverage of this. I would also say that I have a lot of concerns around him entering this race. And as someone who was born and raised in North Central Wisconsin and spent a lot of time in the service industry, I have plenty of anecdotes and stories about him that I won't dive into, but are not great. I don't have a ton of respect for the guy, so I think that, his reputation in Wisconsin and northern Wisconsin is an issue. I think that the way that he announced this, I don't know if anyone else read it, it was atrocious. I don't think he could have used the word naive more than he did. It was overkill in describing Hong. Like he literally went after what I think is our top contender right now. And I don't understand why he would do that. And I have theories, right? But sure. I think that's a trash approach to it. I don't think he has an actual plan. I mean, he didn't even have the signature forms properly distributed. He was just like, here, everybody download this and sign paperwork for me. And that's not how this works. And I would also say that I think that you've had a little bit of an influence on him, and it makes me question where exactly he stands. Because
what do you mean by that?
I feel like he's had some newly progressive style or rhetoric and talking points that, before you started coming on and contributing, I felt like he was a little bit more of a blue no matter who, staunch Democrat guy. And I'm also not convinced that some of his ideas are truly his own. So I have lots of concerns around this.
Well, I mean, I'll be the first one to say it, Anna. If he came out and made his entire platform, we're going to get a Democratic trifecta, and we're going to instill Medicare for all. We're going to start just building homes in some of the land that is not owned by anybody yet in an effort to offer a cheap solution to a problem that's getting out of hand. I'd probably be more inclined, not necessarily to continue working there, but to at the very least say, oh, okay, this is an interesting development, and I look forward to learning about what's going on here. To me, it just seems like the phrase hat on a hat, if you will. There were progressives in this race already. All that's happening now is there's a little bit of a split in the outcome here that's going to be interesting. Again, if you want to run, more power to you. That's the way the system works here. This just all seems out of nowhere, though, and to just go through and systematically attack everybody on the Democratic ticket as you're doing it is a wild way to do things, to say the least.
Absolutely, and it feels ego fueled, because what kind of candidate comes out and says, I'm the best guy for the job. I don't have a platform yet, but this feels like a trust me bro. And that's literally what we're trying to avoid right now.
Yeah, without a doubt. Anna, I appreciate the call. You take it easy.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, and again, far be it from me. I don't know how widespread her opinion is, but I absolutely think there's a lot of validity to some of the claims that she is making there. Not to say that experience is the only thing that matters when it comes to these kind of conversations, but it definitely is something that needs to be considered. Got a ton of texts coming in here. Kristen says he wants publicity. His announcement is taking away from the progressives outdoing the actual groundwork for a run for governor. 1,000% agree with Anna. She followed up with that last part there. Phil says, I just want to applaud you both for your individual decisions, his to run and yours to separate yourself to retain professionalism. They both seem rooted in morality and well-intended. I appreciate that very much. And Brian says, it's dangerous in business to be politically one-sided, myself included. Let's also say that an axe to grind style to politics is not a good luck, i.e. the Trump DOJ. Here's the difference, though, Brian, and I think it's why people are going to have to take this campaign more seriously than they realize. Trump also won 2 out of 3 times, and he didn't even really have any ideas. It was just run on vitriol, something about Mexicans and trans people, and being able to zing anybody that was running against him in that particular moment. I'm with you in a lot of what you're saying there, but I think this might carry more weight. I think what it's ultimately going to boil down to, the fundamental question about this entire move here, is what percentage of the people on that Substack in social media are actually local to Wisconsin, in the state of Wisconsin somewhere, and how many people are kind of contributing and following along from around the country. And that's going to ultimately have some impact on what takes place here. Look, I'm hopeful he comes out. And I'll admit, to Anna's point, I did get a little bit of poor man's outside the box from the run. And as I mentioned, I do 2 hours worth of podcasting plus write an article every week. So it'll be pretty easy to understand how I think and how I talk about different elements of politics here. But if he comes out and he actually means business, well, that's one story, and we can look at it and we can take it seriously from there, which I'm absolutely happy to do. My spider senses are up as of right now, and I think that sums it up. David says she don't like Kurt's approach to politics. A simple answer: don't vote for him. Exactly. I kind of feel like that's the general consensus here, and it's just a matter of where are those votes coming from, where would they have gone, so on and so forth. But that's the name of the game. That much I have respect for. It's a matter of saying how nervous we are about what Donald Trump is, his threats to democracy, whatever the situation is, and then turn around and be like, by the way, all the Democrats suck, and if you don't nominate me, we should like the Republicans are probably going to win. Like that to me hasn't been exemplified, at least yet, by the existing candidates. And now I have a feeling that this whole thing is about to get a lot uglier than it has been for the last couple of months as we get closer to August here. Still plenty of time. We got another call here. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, it's just me. I just wanted to follow up on the axe to grind, way to get into politics. And you said, well, you don't agree, but look Trump got into office, but look where he's at. No platform, just an axe to grind. And now he's dangerously throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks to get us out of mess after mess after mess. I don't know Kurt. I know the politics of Oneida County or where he's at. And I know, and I trust that Anna knows more about it than I do. But, is it going to do anybody in politics or the governor race to have him get in? I don't know whether that's going to be a benefit or not, but it is going to take away from some probably highly, some better candidates. I guess I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with it. I mean, obviously, Anna frustrated with the way that they're talking about that he's like immediately came out of the gates. But I mean, Francesca Hong's also the front runner, and you don't get to first place by attacking second place. So I understand it from that perspective a little bit here. But there's some elements here, man, that I think we are absolutely going to see things shaken up, and at a time when it feels like Democrats can trip into a victory, leave it to Wisconsin to find a way to make it a nail biter all the way up until November. But only time will tell. Go ahead. Yeah,
I do have one more concern, though. I mean, turning up the dials, because that seems to be what's going on. Turning up the dials and putting the heat on is I guess something that I was hoping we could stay away from. I don't think it's going to do anybody any good to get everybody all fired up instead of being a little bit more rational. And I'm hoping that there's a lot more rationality to this election instead of mudslinging. So I'm hoping that it's going to be a little less cantankerous, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, here's
Thanks.
to hoping. Yeah, thank you for the call, Brian. Here's to hoping, although I'm not particularly optimistic about what's going on. It's a wild situation. It's a wild situation to say the least. And here's the crazy part is it is only just getting started. Anna's following up on the YouTube page, seeing that a lot of the support is coming from mostly out of state, which I mean, that very well could be the case. Only time will tell where this is ultimately headed. I don't like seeing them all attack one another because, again, Tom Tiffany is going to be coming out of this relatively unscathed. He's not running against anybody in the primary, so they're running him out there. And very much, it seems to me, the political strategist that I am, trying to run on the idea that Donald Trump Tom Tiffany has nothing to do with Donald Trump. He's just a normal guy. We shouldn't be reading too much into what's going on, something that I'm not particularly willing to subscribe to here. The fact of the matter is, though, when you attack these kind of candidates, definitely a way to get on some people's radar, that's for sure. So that's all of my thoughts on it for now. As we learn more about the policy and the things that they are saying, I welcome anybody else's opinion, of course. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Kirk Bankstead, owner of the Monaco Brewing Company, announces his run for governor in Wisconsin. If you are just joining, I would like to emphasize again, I am no longer associated with the Monaco Brewing Times. I am removing myself from this element until, of course, the campaign is over, just so that you guys know that I am on the up and up and reporting on this in a way that is acceptable and isn't biased or paid for, more specifically, in any kind of way. I promise you, you will get the exact kind of coverage you should expect as this goes on here. We're going to throw it to a quick commercial break. I see David and a handful of others, Ben, and a number without a name, all have messages, plus YouTube, plus TikTok. I'll try and scour through some of these and get the best idea I can for as many of these as I can. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY. Jaramani says his jumping into the race feels like a tantrum to me, mainly because of some of the candidates called out his free beer post, which I get that. It does feel like the timing's a bit suspicious, all things considered. But there's also a lot of eyes on him. Again, how many of those eyes are in Wisconsin? Another conversation entirely. Ben says, I think it's dangerous and he's dangerous. If he wins, that shows how much one wants the other side dead. No, it doesn't. And he's not going to win. I mean, I feel like it's a ridiculous sentiment here. Just let that, if he gets to above 5%, I'd be surprised. It's just a matter of which one of those. I have my thoughts, but assuming everything stays cordial aimed at me, I'm not going to be unprofessional about what's going on. But let's just say, Donald Trump campaigned as a populist, and during 2024, when I watched him campaign, I could spot him. I'd point my finger at him. I'd say fake populist. I'll allow you guys to infer what I mean when I use that example in talking about this candidacy. Ethan out in Appleton says, reminds me of Alex Lasry running in 2022 Senate race. No policy, but sucked some of the oxygen out of the room for better candidates like Tom Nelson. That feels a little bit more like it's the case. And to be perfectly frank, none of the Democrats in the field, or Tom Tiffany for that matter, have the social following that the Minocqua Brewing Company does. So that's definitely an advantage to have right there in terms of not necessarily needing to bank on advertising and things of that nature. But definitely an abrupt announcement that, again, I cannot stress enough, I didn't even know was going to happen. I found out with the rest of you guys here as to how we ended up here. With Kirk Bangstad announcing his run in the presidency. And I'm just going to keep saying it just because I know the audience is in a perpetual state of changing. Yes, I used to write and do podcasts there. I officially do not anymore. I reserve the right to come back after the campaign is over if I am desired to come back. But what's funny is I could show you guys correspondence where it's like, you got to be nicer to Dems. And I was like, no. And that was kind of where the conversations would end. So, I take the job seriously, and so there is no tie anymore, and I can promise you that you will get nothing but unfettered coverage of what is going on in this gubernatorial race coming from me. As I've been highlighting, we are expecting Francesca Hong to be on the program on Friday. I met her when I was doing that speech for the 7th District 2 weekends ago. Available on my YouTube page, by the way, for those of you that haven't subscribed yet. Check it out. Just type in @BenCominos. Larry says, is Donald Trump or Kirk Bangstad good for politics? I would argue yes. They exposed many of the flaws that we have in our political system. Oh, I mean, and the thing is, they've always been there. What's very ironic is there is a show called Black Mirror on Netflix. It's an anthology series. It's supposed to take place in the not too distant future. And there was an episode moments before, like days, if not a couple weeks before Donald Trump announced he was running back in 2015, where a cartoon character dog ends up running for office. And the guy who voiced him was like, he was aggressive and he would insult people. And like, it's kind of nuts how prophetic it was. And so this was on people's mind. It's crazy how much the artists kind of highlight this stuff. I mean, realistically, how many people message this show and are like, Ben, you should run for office, even though all it is like I expressed the basics of humanity and highlight a couple of historical facts, and all of a sudden everybody's having like, oh, this guy should do it. This is what leaves room for a Donald Trump or Kirk Bangstad to exist, is when it feels like the system has let you down. I have a segment planned for later on in the program about farming bankruptcies, and highlighting that, yes, it is objectively worse now that Donald Trump is president, but things were not trending in the right direction under Democrats. It's when there are no solutions that people are willing to step up and kind of take over an entire scenario that aren't necessarily qualified for it. A lot of people I can see in the comments across the way different platforms here, super excited about Francesca Hong. Yeah, it should be in the 10 o'clock hour on Friday, working on confirming that. Val says, I feel like Minocqua Brewing owner is just contributing to the noise in this ever-growing and convoluted political landscape in an unapologetic cash grab, or more so easy publicity in his case. And yes, I did quote Dr. Seuss, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Yeah, I absolutely feel you there. As someone with the Graham Plattner fan club is on my TikTok page here. I mean, I've been seeing the 4 picture squares, and it shows Mamdani, it shows Graham Plattner, it shows El Said in Michigan, and it shows Francesca Hong in Wisconsin, highlighting that progressives, actual progressives, really are starting to build a little bit of momentum here as time goes forward. And as someone says, I wouldn't be opposed to an independent party president, but I don't think the system is set up for that. And that's kind of the issue. I'll be real with you. I think we are beyond the point of ever having very straightforward primaries again. I think we will always see between 7 and 15 people running for office. And there will be an obvious handful of people that you expect, like even with the gubernatorial race right now, assuming there isn't some kind of massive shakeup, Hong, Barnes, and Rodriguez are all polling infinitely further ahead of all of the other candidates. We're going to get all of them on here. But very clearly, as it stands today, barring some kind of stance that is going to make you stand out from the crowd, I feel like the favorites have been chosen, as more people are suggesting ranked choice voting in my comments as I move forward here. Trust me, I've been one of the loudest voices about that since I moved out here, but it's going to require the people in power to allow it. And if they have to actually compete with real ideas, it's going to be a lot more difficult to win. So they'd rather force us all into these 2 parties that I think I'll speak for the majority of people listening to this show when I say I most certainly don't feel represented by either of the political parties in 2026, and something tells me I am not alone in that sentiment here. Karen says, I don't believe Wisconsin people will take him seriously. I think it's a publicity thing and won't gain much traction. Here's the deal with that statement, though, and I really want you guys to adhere to this. People said the exact same thing about Donald Trump in 2015. And I think that's really important. I'm not asking you to take it seriously. I'm asking you to know that some people will take it seriously. And I think you're going to need to acknowledge that. Again, I'm going to invite him on the show down the line. I'm obviously going to get the candidates who have been in the race for a while here first, but I'll get them on and we'll have a real conversation about the future of housing and healthcare and what we're going to do about farming in Wisconsin. And the list goes on and on here, because there's going to need to be more to the platform than Republicans or some snowflakes that get really mad when you joke about their stuff, but their jokes are actually very funny, and you're the snowflake for getting offended when they make a joke. Like, there's got to be more to it than that. I recognize that's frustrating, and I could dedicate 2 hours a day every single day to that inevitable reality, but nevertheless, I think it's worth taking seriously, because it's when you sleep on this kind of stuff that it tends to gain momentum. Always remember, Mamdani was polling at 1% when he entered the race. You had no idea who Mamdani was, right? So just always remember that when you see this kind of stuff, because it's a very real possibility that I think a lot of people are going to need to brace for, because we watched it happen with Trump. We watched it happen with Mamdani, and it very easily could happen here, especially with an inflated megaphone. So Kirkbankstad's in the race here. We have an already crowded field, and we are adding another one in there. So just keep your head on a swivel as we continue learning more about these candidates, and I'm going to do my part to become the one-stop shop. Where actually I spoke about it with my friend and colleague Haley Tenpes. We're probably going to have a special part of the website designated for people to go, and we're just going to have all of my conversations with all of the different gubernatorial candidates all in one location as they start happening here. And it's going to be not with the spin. I'm not going to allow people to use the politics to get out of here. I've been withholding a lot of political interviews on this show lately, as I kind of am finding the new voice of what this program is. And I think moments like this weekend kind of give me a little bit of guidance into what I need to do professionally from my perspective. Asking me for thoughts on Barnes. Very preliminarily, again, I was reading over how all 7 candidates basically have the same ideas for a public option here in Wisconsin, but different ideas of how to pay for it. They have different ideas for what we're going to do with the surplus and how we can raise revenues and yada, yada, yada. My experience with Barnes stems back to 2022. He's actually one of the first interviews I ever did on this program, and it's still available on the WHBY app, but you would have to scroll really far back because he was, I want to say he came on the program in October of 22, moments before his election against Ron Johnson to be a U.S. Senator here in Wisconsin. And I refused, as I always refuse. I don't give the questions to my guests before they come here. It is not a normal thing that happens in media. Normally, there's at least a rundown. And trust me, his campaign manager was very specific. It's a professional courtesy that we at least have some semblance of what this interview is going to be about before we agree to come on. And I was like, it's about his platform. Either you're comfortable or you're not talking about it. I'll let you decide which one of those you'd rather be. And it took 15 different emails, but eventually he agreed to come on the program and without receiving the questions beforehand. And he had a 15-minute conversation. And you know what? He absolutely loved his time with me. I'm very good at the job. And that's my only experience with him going forward. So I was relatively new to Wisconsin when I was interviewing him. I had my thoughts about Ron Johnson just as an outsider, but he's got his pros and his cons, but it definitely seems as though, given the name recognition that he has, you would think he'd be starting from a higher starting point than where he is in terms of name recognition in early polling. You would think both he and Sarah Rodriguez would have a little bit of that name recognition advantage, both having been a lieutenant governor and run for Senate, as well as currently being the lieutenant governor, which probably says something about what's going on. I don't know if Sanders has endorsed anybody in the campaign yet. I'll be honest with you. I hadn't heard anything about that, but something tells me they're going to let it play out a little bit before we get any closer, because there's front runners right now, but this is in political time. There's absolutely plenty of time. Hell, I look at a lot of life through the lens of sports racing horse racing, I should say. And you never want to be the horse that's in the front of the track during a horse race, as we saw over the weekend. Whoever's winning early on definitely very rarely ends up at the end, on the top at the end. So something tells me that has to do with endorsements as well. But we'll have to wait and see where things go from there. Hayes saying we have good options. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's a lot of good options there. Karen saying, believe we're more informed thanks to social media. Okay, I get the sentiment, but I also think that the first Trump term was a lot of people just looking for a change without realizing what Trump was about. I'd like to believe we're more informed thanks to you in social media. Oh, that's so nice. But yes, I do agree with you. We're better informed than we used to be. But as I highlighted last week, there's a lot of mole people that haven't found this show. And so I put that on all of you guys. I only have so much of an advertising budget. So we need to tell more people about this show. We're trying our best. But I don't know. It's an interesting development here. We got another call. We got a little bit of time left here. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, good morning, Ben.
Hey, what's up, man?
So when it comes to this guy, I don't know if you read my text or not. I was in the store.
I did.
But I think it's concerning that if someone like this, now he's probably not going to win, but at the same time, if somebody like that were to win, when they were offering free beer if the president dies, I think that is just the tip of the iceberg on where this person's mind is at and what type of legislation or how would this person govern people who disagree with him politically.
I think it's a very fair question.
Offering compensation to people if the president were to pass away. to put it lightly. That's my concern.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid concern that he's going to need to answer. I mean, and I most certainly I feel like it's more likely he'd agree to come on this show than a lot of others just because we have a bit of a working relationship from before, but I most certainly won't pull my punches, and that'll be the first question I ask him, because while I think the Trump administration is leaving a lot of blue cities out in alerts right now, especially when it comes to federal funding for disasters, it's on a statewide level here, and the more local you become, the more people really need to trust that you'd be looking out for them. And I feel like it would be very difficult um, to look at him and think that he actually means business for people in the rural
Sure.
areas. And I think that's a fair assessment. Go ahead.
And I think I've said this to everybody who knows me basically, is I didn't even vote the 2024 election. I didn't vote at all. I didn't vote for Trump. Obviously, didn't vote for Harris. Been pretty vocal on the Harris, but didn't vote at all. And I get in these debates on social media with people, and basically the point I'm trying to make when I debate people, and I think people that talk to me know me better than people who just interact with me on text message, because I'm not the best writer. I may come across as a bit of a jerk.
Yeah, well,
But at the same time, I had a lady that just relentlessly was messaging me saying that because I didn't vote, I am condoning all the bad behavior Trump does. I am responsible for what Trump does because I didn't vote, period.
well,
And I said, the system
nothing
is
gets me
broken.
more mad
Both
than
sides
that.
are broken.
Yeah.
And yet it's still my fault. And I'm like, I do not take accountability for anything anybody else does other than myself.
Yeah.
And this person just won't accept that.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get no pushback from me here, but I'll be honest with you, it's a never-ending battle. I have actually been told, and I can't even say exactly what I was told to do because it'll probably get me banned on TikTok. But let's just say people were suggesting that I go and find a very high bridge because of my comments about Kamala Harris not being qualified and that having nothing to do with her gender or race. I'm right there with you, and those people never go away. But to bring it back to Kirk, and I got to let you go because I'm just about out of time. But to bring it back to Kirk, that kind of only will stoke the tensions here surrounding the inflamed rhetoric in politics. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it uniquely is coming from Kirk, because in a lot of ways he is only going to kind of mirror what's been taking place for the last dozen or so years, as Brian highlights in my text messages here. But at the same time, I do get his sentiment there, and I think it's worth talking about. And someone asking, that was Ben who was on the phone a moment ago. But I think it's definitely worth highlighting as well. And to be frank, let's be real, most right-coded individuals probably weren't voting for Kirk anyway. But more on that for another time. Look, if you guys want to keep it here, we can. Otherwise, I'm going to jump into the world of the economy in the 10 o'clock hour here. We're going to have a little bit of a lengthier break because I did use all of my time and then get a chance to get to that third segment. If you haven't already, download the WHBY app and also consider subscribing to my TikTok page, YouTube, and Facebook. We're going live via video stream every single day, trying to build up those channels as well. So definitely enjoy seeing those numbers go up too. We'll keep it rolling. Got plenty more topics to jump into here from over the weekend, or we can stay right here in Wisconsin, whatever you guys are thinking. We'll be back. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY. Imagine robbing a gas station when all you have to do is buy a lottery ticket and you're going to be rich. Like, you were already there. Just pay the dollar and then don't ruin your life. It's not particularly difficult here, guys. Geez, free advice from some radio guys. Here's Hooper. All right, we're back. Ben Cominos, WHBY, Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we spent basically the better part of the entire first hour talking about the announcement of Kirk Bangstad, owner of Minocqua Brewing Company, running for governor of Wisconsin here. A little bit about my thoughts. And if you are new to the conversation here, I'm going to keep emphasizing it, and I probably will be saying it the next couple of days. I am not affiliated with Minocqua Brewing Company newsletter anymore. I had been up until this week. In order to save my own neutrality and being able to still take pride in what I'm doing for you guys here, I have chosen myself to step away. I was not asked for any kind of endorsement. This was 100% a Ben Cominos decision. So just so we're all on the same page here, you will still be getting the exact same kind of coverage that you should expect to get surrounding these gubernatorial candidates as we are prepping to start bringing them on the programs. I should say, starting as recently as the end of this week with Francesca Hong being on the show on Friday. And we're just trying to find a time for State Senator Kelda Royce as well. And we'll get the rest of everybody else on there too. So just to put any kind of conversation to bed, I got a couple texts about it and emails about it before I even went on the air. So I'm going to keep reiterating that this show is still exactly the show that you would expect it to be. You'll know. It's like the meme, like, You won't know what I won't tell you that I won the lottery, but there will be signs. If I ever sold out, like, please know you'd be like, man, I can't believe Ben bought his fourth house. Like, you'll know. You'll know when I've sold. I'd be like, okay, we can tune out. At this point, he's become a cog in the system, and we can just check out. You'll know. So, just so we all are on the same page of that, I'm going to run through a couple more texts, and then I'm going to move on here. They kept piling in. Mickey saying, I think Kirk's a bad idea. My only interaction or experience is I drive past the brewery every day on my route. Also, last year, I laughed at him for going on social media and whining and crying. How about the inhumane conditions of the county jail and how unfairly he was treated after picking a fight with the guy across the street from him? He immediately blocked me from Facebook. Yeah, it sounds about right. It's very much like Trump, and we don't need any more of that. That seems like a general consensus with a lot of people here. Again, not my words, but seems like a general consensus nevertheless. Kristen says, you've already given more than enough airtime than he deserves. My point about publicity, you're probably right, but I also can't help myself. There's Thank you for that, Blue Canary. DSL says, is his free beer thing only for Trump, or was it when any president dies, including uniparty presidents Bush, Clinton, Obama, and Biden? How radical is this non-binary individual? Well, that's exactly the problem, right? And it's where my issue with this whole conversation stems from it. As somebody who, let's just say, as I often state, I'm an actual leftist. The Democratic Party portrays themselves as the left, and then as DSL kind of highlighted there, kind of acts like some Bush-era Republicans, very uniparty-esque. And to answer your question, DSL, no, it is specifically for Donald Trump, because in the eyes of a lot of individuals, he is not me, for the record. I'm not condoning this belief in any way. In the eyes of a lot of liberals, Donald Trump is somehow unique to this political system and not a symptom of this political system. So the free beer on the passing of a president day is only for Donald Trump, which innately is going to disqualify him in the minds of at least a third of the people that live in this state, if not more. Again, there are a lot of candidates in this race. I believe the grand total is up to 8, maybe 9 at this point, depending on how you count the candidates. There's a lot of good ideas out there. So rather than getting bogged down in the negative, maybe focus on the positive instead would be the best advice I can give to anybody trying to make a decision here as more people continue entering this race. David says, I didn't vote for the Senate in the last Wisconsin election. I could never vote for Ron Johnson, and I couldn't vote for Barnes because of his misrepresentation about his educational credentials. I dig that. I mean, everybody's got their reasons for voting or not voting. Again, I am not going to speak towards the 2022 race because I entered it so late, and it's so funny. Like, I remember getting this job and being like, well, I can't tell these people who lived here how they should vote and what they should think about certain things. And now I show up, I'm like, this is how I would vote, and this is how you should feel about certain things. And it's funny kind of watching the show evolve, but I absolutely had to grow into that. So when that race was first happening, I just kind of felt it out. If you remember correctly, though, Ron Johnson had all those spots that would play during my show talking about bail reform. And I would come back from commercial break, and then I would highlight how he was misrepresenting bail reform relative to how Mandela Barnes was running on bail reform, which was kind of funny. And lastly, before we move on, Jerry says, I've been following politics for a long time. There's always been amusing fringe candidates who get more publicity than they deserve. Remember Jimmy McMillan. I'll allow you guys to remember Jimmy McMillan. I most certainly don't, but just based on the picture here, absolutely hilarious still that you sent me here. Definitely seems like a character, to say the very least. But so that's the end of my thoughts on the matter there. Probably not the last time we're going to talk about it, of course, but I at least wanted to get out in front of that entire conversation because I thought it was worth highlighting. If for no other reason than my own professional courtesy here, letting you guys know that you do not need to worry about a conflict of interest, because I absolutely nipped that in the bud before anything could happen. Now, I had real conversations planned for this day as well, and I would like to get into those now, if it's okay with everybody else. And I want to start with this conversation about farming. If you don't follow me on any of my socials, then you haven't seen this yet, but I posted and it's available via government data. This is not spin. It's farming bankruptcies on a year-by-year basis, starting in 2017 and ending in 2025. And it highlights something that we have talked about on this show regularly, because during the Biden years in 2024, I would be telling you guys about how farming bankruptcies were trending upward. And then Trump's first year in 2025, I would continue saying that. When we would talk about the tariffs and when we would talk about how the excess costs brought about by this administration would negatively impact the farming industry, I would say, well, that may very well be the case, especially with the installation of these tariffs. But at the same time, you can't watch bankruptcies go up year over year from 2022 until 2024 and then pretend that bankruptcies going up in 2025 is a big problem. Here's how we need to talk about this kind of stuff, though. It did get way worse in 2025 relative to what was going on in 2022, 3, and 4. And it, more importantly, highlights, as DSL kind of brought up there, what the uniparty is all about. I posted a chart at the end of last week showing the percentage of Americans and how they felt in terms of their finances on a year-by-year basis. And you can see after COVID, the people who were upset or scared about that plummeted by more than 25 percentage points. The percentage of people who were uncertain about their financial future plummeted from 55% to under 30% after COVID. Why is that? Because we actually engaged in government spending that went to the people that live in America and social programs making life and the basics of life more attainable for a larger percentage of Americans. We then looked at that data and said in 2022 and said, you know what? F those people, and immediately removed all of that funding and watched it shoot back up from under 30% to up over 55% again. And that was in 2022 when you saw that happen. You know who was in charge in 2022? The Democrats. They had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and they rolled that stuff back. Why does it feel like I'm an ADD individual and I started off talking about farms and then pivoted to people and their attitudes towards the economy? What do these have in common? During the first Trump presidency, I am now going to read to you the number of farming bankruptcies that took place. 501, 498, 595, 580. The lowest number there is 498. We'll call it 500 for round numbers here. In the 4 Biden years, the numbers were 276, 169, 193, and 216. Even the highest number there in 2021 is barely half of the lowest number during the Trump terms. This is not me telling you that it was Trump's policies or that Democrats somehow mean more business for farmers. Similarly to the attitude towards our economics, farming bankruptcies ended the second we started funneling countless billions of dollars into the industry. Something that I think certain Republicans and conservatives might be against because the government's picking winners and losers. But when it comes to access to food, when it comes to being able to grow and fertilize the crops that we need to bleep and eat, I am okay with the idea of the government completely nationalizing the industry, to be perfectly frank, but at the very least, floating enough money to keep these people afloat. So again, during the Biden years, it was 276 and then 169, 193, 216. It has been trending upwards after hitting that low in 2022 when we started rolling back the subsidies. And then Donald Trump gets the 46% jump in 2025 from 216 up to 315. Still quite a ways away from the numbers during the first administration, but is still trending upward. And the only thing that I see on my social feeds, the only thing I see going on in mainstream media is a bunch of finger pointing, saying, what percentage of farmers voted for Donald Trump? They deserve this outcome. If they didn't realize that Donald Trump didn't know what he was doing, then they deserve to lose their farms for what took place, while completely glossing over the fact that, yes, it is obviously worse given the decisions that Donald Trump is making, but had been trending in the wrong direction now for 3.5 years, and somehow trying to only use the moments when the Republican trifecta exists to highlight the shortcomings of this approach. And guys, I don't, you know me, I'm not one to stoke panic or fear or anything like that in the conversation. But if you have not seen the data made available by pick your agricultural source, America averages between zero point 0.6 and 0.8 million tons of fertilizer on a month-by-month basis. This is what was tracked through the Strait of Hormuz. Since the battling started at the beginning of March, those numbers haven't even approached 0.2, 200,000 tons of fertilizer since it started. We average between 600 and 800,000 tons every single month. And our highest since then is the first part of the first month. This is on a weekly basis per month. I'm just starting in March. Our first week of March, we approached 100,000 tons of fertilizer, and we're lucky if we get to 50,000 in a week since then. Several weeks have zero. If you think farmers are struggling now without federal subsidy being pumped into the conversation, it is going to get a whole hell of a lot worse. And those decisions are explicitly brought about by Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Were farming bankruptcies trending upwards during the Biden administration? Yes, they absolutely were. Did the farming bankruptcies trend even further upward once Republicans got hold of I trifecta? Yes, they absolutely did. It's almost like, I'm just going to think of something off the top of my head here. It's almost like Democrats maintain a status quo where we slowly are watching farms declare bankruptcy, and is absolutely unacceptable. But we'll say, if you do not vote for us, then these farms will close at a much faster rate with Republicans in control of all three branches of government. So would you rather we slowly lose these farms, or would you rather we very quickly lose these farms? But the idea of actually saving these farms is not represented by either half of the duopoly. That is the reality facing us today as we are bracing for significantly higher prices, not just at the pump, but in most facets of living as time goes on here. So I just wanted to highlight the real data here. We were one of the loudest voices about farming bankruptcies during the Biden years, and the fact that farmers, of course, showed up for Trump because they were watching their bankruptcies trend upward. Pretending that Donald Trump's efforts have officially made this a problem is objectively a lie. But he very obviously is worse at this, and making it much worse for the average American. Looking forward to seeing what it is that the Trump administration is going to do to stem this tide, because I do not have any faith in the matter. Hopefully I'm wrong here, but the basic way that it has been trending gives me little cause for hope, given what we have watched. And no, pointing fingers at farmers that decided not to vote for your candidate, as Ben highlights, is not going to fix the problem either. Some food for thought there. And while we're on the subject, let's get into Spirit closing as well. I'm going to squeeze a break in now, but when we come back, I want to jump into this here. I don't think it's as accidental as a lot of us realize, and I'm going to jump into why. Similarly to this conversation, both sides have their hands dirty again. And similarly to the fertilizer conversation, one set of hands is way dirtier than the other. We'll talk about how we got there on the other side of the break. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. You know what's better than Googling a plumber and hoping for the best? Checking the reviews and seeing your neighbors already trust and love them. Roush Plumbing has the Google reviews to back it up. Fox Valley homeowners are raving about the fast, friendly, reliable service. And here's something you don't see every day: a free text line to a real plumber. Got a question before you schedule? Text it. Sometimes that's all you need. And with spring rains coming, don't wait to make sure your sump pump is ready. Call or text Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Find that free text line at timroushplumbing.com. Nine two zero 281 1150. 920 281 1150. That's the number to call or text. Get your thoughts about anything that we're talking about here today. Continuing along our path of affordability, we just wrapped up a conversation about farms. DSL says not only do farmers need a bailout, but they need to make it a little more lucrative so the next generation will continue it instead of selling the land for a nice windfall. As my wife nags me about when I go out drinking with the boys, you need to eat. No, exactly. And I mean, that's kind of the bigger issue, right? DSL. That's why I'm in favor of just completely nationalizing it. It's like, give it a reasonable wage. Be like, if you work on the farm, you get 80 grand or whatever it is. And it doesn't matter how much you sell. You're just going to get 80 grand. You just make sure that the food gets out to where it needs to go. The idea, because as you say, you need to eat. And we're about to get into the conversation about air travel. And while it is not a literal necessity, it's not like you have to fly, right? That's not an apples to apples conversation, but it is a very imperative part about how this country functions. And I'd argue that the food conversation is right up there with it. They have allowed the small mom and pop farms to be completely taken out of the picture. And I've had this conversation with you guys before. I had a friend whose father was an organic farmer as a passion. This was not his career. This is what he did now that he was retired. He no longer worked. He had a couple acre farm, and he would grow what he wanted to grow and go to farmers markets. And if he didn't sell a thing, whatever. And if he sold everything he made, great. But it was never in line with making profit. It was just something to do. And so his son and I worked together at the last sales job that I ever had. And he and I would go back and forth. Donald Trump had just become president. I was still getting my sea legs when it came to talking about politics in general. Back then, I would just complain to whoever could hear my voice at the bar compared to where I am today. And I would say, he'd say, yeah, it's the third year in a row that we voted for this conservative representative in our district, in the third year in a row where none of the farming subsidies are actually going to the small mom and pop farms. They're all going to all of these different locations, and they're not going to the farmers that actually deserve it. That was when I learned about what big ag was. It was 2017. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I said, why is it that all these farmers keep voting for the party that very clearly is sending our tax dollars off to a handful of farms that don't need it for the profit? Meanwhile, all these other farms are struggling. And this is back when over 500 farms were going bankrupt every single year. And he said to me, well, the way our district is drawn, we're also lumped in with this very wealthy district that always votes Republican. He said, you'd be surprised how many of the farmers in our county are actually growing aware of the fact that while these subsidies are technically meant to benefit them, they don't really see a large percentage of the benefits, but their votes are kind of canceled out by the large people hoping to make a couple extra $100 in the form of trickle-down economics. I'm like, well, all of that does tend to track in the appropriate direction. And so even back then, I was saying these people are the people responsible for our food. Like, very few jobs actually take precedent over that one. Trust me, as a former sales rep, I'm here to tell you right now, I never sold anything that was more life or death than what was going on here. You know what I mean? And so I'm right there with you. And as I've stated, and I will continue saying it, I am for full-blown nationalization of the food process. I'm for nationalizing food, energy, and air travel. I don't think, and healthcare for that matter. There are certain components of life. The idea of profiting and services for a profit should be saved for stuff that isn't necessary, right? Like I always highlight, there should be a government-funded healthcare, and then if you have extra money, you should have access to the fancy healthcare that gives you the name brand drugs. Like that, I don't think is out of the question. You should be able to get on an airplane, whether or not you get the fancy first class seats or some first class dinner. Well, that's another conversation entirely, and it determines how much money you make. I mean, hell, when I went to Thailand, my flight was by far the most expensive part of my entire travel, and it was $1,000. If I wanted to, I could pay $4,000, actually more than that, and I'd have a little bed that I could lay in. But instead, I had a window seat on a 14-hour flight, and the guy who was in the middle seat only got up one time. Have you ever dealt, and like, I'm too much of a people pleaser to wake you up and be like, can you please get up? I'd like to stretch my legs. So I got up one time in a 14-hour flight that I paid $1,000 to go on, because I was like, well, I'm not paying $4,000 is not worth the price of admission to me. And if it is worth the price of admission to you, right on, that should be allowed. But that should be how all systems work. There should be like the obvious, okay, get you in the door price. And then there should be the, well, if you want to be fancy about it, you can be fancy about it, but that's only going to be for the people that put the time in to be fancy about it. That should be the way that all of these systems work. And we are watching these farms bankrupt more and more, and no one's willing to have the real conversations. Republicans right now pretending that it's strictly Joe Biden's fault. Democrats right now pretending that the bankruptcies are only just starting now that Donald Trump is in office. And I'm here to tell you right now, they were happening during the Biden administration. They have only gotten worse during the Trump administration, and we brought them close to zero as a result of actually using government funds to not make farmers whole, but the entire American population. And then the same people that voted to do that voted to take it away from us, and we completely went in free fall after that. And like, as I oftentimes state, whether it be farming bankruptcies, whether it be peace of mind about your economic situation, whether it be about children in hunger, America has to be one of the only countries in existence to apply tax dollars to a problem, actively see that problem begin to recede, and then be like, whoa, 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 never mind, that's not enough starving kids. Let's get rid of that child tax credit so the starving child number goes back up. And sure enough, we did, and sure enough, it did. That is how this country's wired. And until we're willing to push back against those forces that clearly know what's necessary to address these issues, we're going to find ourselves following the same patterns. Case in point, we did a show about it a week and a half ago. So, Comrade Trump decided to revert back to socialism, $500 million for Spirit Airways, a move that I highlighted I was in favor of. And I even went on to talk about it from this perspective. Spirit Airlines was the last option for affordable flights for the average person. When I was talking about this initial Spirit announcement 10 or 11 days ago, the $500 million bailout, I said, I'm seeing a lot of people online making fun of the caliber of flights that you get on Spirit, saying their chairs are made of cardboard, saying that the flights are not comfortable, your bags don't fit anywhere, it feels like the plane's going to fall apart the entire time you're on it. And yes, all of those statements are true. I've flown Spirit plenty of times in my life. You're just like, I hope we make it. It's like a running gag for people flying Spirit. I am right there with you. No shade whatsoever, but it's what you get for budget airlines. Here's the thing. It was the last thing resembling budget airlines. And to me personally, I believe that this operation was allowed to fail because there is now no air travel group that is going to offer affordable prices that act as a counterbalance to what the big three plus Southwest are doing in the airline industry. There was an effort for a merger between JetBlue and Spirit Airlines. And I'm here to tell you right now, even had it gone through, and I'm going to talk about why I didn't want it to begin with, but even had it gone through, we are now talking about two smaller companies in an industry with multiple bankruptcy filings in recent history. There is no evidence that you're going to point me towards that shows a merger between two companies that act that way are going to show any type of long-time sustainability, and then they both would be going under, allowing for even less competition. The air flight industry has had the wheels absolutely come off over the last couple of decades, and as we've highlighted, if you want to fly, you're going to fly. The price really doesn't matter. If you need to get somewhere, you're going to take advantage of it. Jason Zimmerman and Jason is an avid traveler, for those of you that listen to the Friday What's Been Happening segment, he says they're adopting the models of hotels where you charge even more for the hotel rooms than you were, and if you don't sell out, so be it. The extra cost associated for the people that do buy in this K-shaped economy will more than nullify the seats that are not sold to people. And we've done the stories about price surveillance. The woman or the man who was looking to get a ticket for a funeral watched the price shoot up $230 in one day because this person was searching for affordable flights. There are so many issues within the airline industry, and losing an airline like Spirit is only going to make it worse. I can tell you right now, I'm a 38-year-old man, and when I had the opportunity to fly, my first question always was, is Spirit offering a flight before I look elsewhere? Because I don't care how nice the plane looks when I show up. I would much rather just get to where I need to go and have as much money as is feasibly possible in my pocket when I get there. And Spirit was known for doing that. And yet you see conservatives on TV blaming Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden and AOC and the best part of the Biden administration, Lena Khan, for preventing these mergers because, again, less options are not good. And now this airline is being choked out by the handful of major airlines that are able to muscle out this kind of an operation like that in a time when jet fuel is shooting through the roof. Because that fundamentally is what pushed us into this moment. They were hanging on by a thread and we're going to need some kind of intervention going forward. But the fact remains, the reason they closed down, and do not get it twisted, is because of a war of choice in Iran, creating even further inflated costs than what we were already dealing with. And any operation that was already on its last legs is going to feel the outcome from this year. And they want to put it on Lena Khan and the fact that we actually had an antitrust department for the first time in 4.5 decades that was willing to hold major corporations to account. And the people with money are trying to convince you that that is what is ultimately leading to these astronomical airline prices that we are seeing, in conjunction with even less competition than what we saw just a few days ago. Interesting food for thought. We got our first call in the matter. I welcome anybody else's thoughts as well. 920-281-1150. 920-281-1150. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hi, Ben. Jerry from Appleton. Your monologue that you just did about the airlines reminds me of the following thing. A few years ago, Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia retired after 51 years in the United States Senate. And I remember he was interviewed, and the interviewer asked him, Senator Byrd, you've been there for 51 years. Are there any votes that you regret? And he said, yes, but only two. He said, I voted against the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and in retrospect, that was wrong. The other vote that I regret was I voted in favor of airline deregulation.
Wow.
And
I
that
mean,
was a while ago, but
yeah.
the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Isn't that the truth? And now here we are. I mean, I'll just let you go because you just sent me off on another tangent. But you're exactly right, and I appreciate the call. You take it easy, Jerry. And it goes to show you, when you vilify a word like regulations, because I have been sharing on and off as our energy costs go up, I've been sharing my experience having come from and worked in an industry that dealt with the deregulation of energy prices and worked on holding those individuals to account. And I think that's worth highlighting, that anytime we talk about deregulation or getting government out of a situation, it typically goes to show you that while government is corrupt, it also tends to act as the only backstop that prevents major capital from just consuming everything in its way. And it looks like the airline industry is just the latest casualty to that line of thinking here. And the people who voted for it then do mea culpa and say, I probably shouldn't have voted for it. And the people who currently have the capacity to vote are telling you about whatever new laundry list of regulations is also holding you down, and what to do about that. And it's cyclical in nature, and it absolutely drives me nuts. But without truly having a real accounting, a real conversation about how this works, about what led us to this outcome and why we are here, and why Donald Trump was considering a $500 million bailout before any of this happened, why I was in favor of it, and why all of the socialist fearmongers of the Republican right didn't have a thing to say about Donald Trump's announcement, about why they closed anyway. And as Jim kind of highlights here, there was no possible way for Spirit to survive Trump's jet fuel prices skyrocketing. Normally, a president has very little actual influence on gas prices, but deliberately starting a Middle East war and closing the strait is different. And I've been saying as much for the last couple of weeks here, but yeah, exactly. And it was those astronomical prices that ended up closing it down. It's just like how the stagnation of the Great Recession ended up ending the careers of any small mom and pops that were on the fence. If you had a little bit of wiggle room, you were able to survive it. If you didn't, you didn't. And it seems to get over exemplified every time there is a moment like this. And I can't stand that this is the person who said this, because he kind of has turned out to be a very shady person. But Russell Brand has a very good clip of him on the Bill Maher show where he says every time there's a war-based emergency, the defense contractors make record profits. Anytime there's an energy-based emergency, the energy companies make record-based profits. Anytime there's a medical-based emergency, the medical industry makes record profits. He says as long as we are able to continue facilitating a system that rewards different industries based on what kind of emergency that we are in, then we're always going to find ourselves in some kind of emergency emergency that results in those costs going up. People always say life feels different now. Like, I'll be honest, I took Saturday off from politics. I went out, I was social, I had fun. It was a solid time. And like, I woke up Sunday morning, casually hungover, like almost holding my breath when I turned the TV on. I'm like, what happened last night that I'm not going to want to know about? And it turns out the answer was nothing. But something tells me that that's not the way that people used to wake up and try and ingest the news. But that's where we're living in today. And Spirit is just the most recent casualty of that. And while we already were consolidated beyond the point of no return, this is absolutely going to impact us, much like the fertilizer shortage is going to hit all of us. Like, we have not felt that yet. We're watching farms bankrupt at record pace, and they are going to go bankrupt faster as a result of not having access to fertilizer once the supply demand curve really kicks in here. But we're on the pace for more of these emergencies to happen. And with these emergencies are going to come even more inflated prices. And yes, if you're listening to me and you're a Democrat, I'm sure that's exciting from a November blue tsunami perspective, that the people who only pay attention to politics for like 7 seconds a week are going to see this, immediately blame the Republican Party, and then vote for Democrats, which, in I think a lot of your minds, you think will result in this problem getting fixed. But I'm here to tell you, a lot of these problems, although obviously worse than they were 2 years ago, are going to persist regardless of what happens in November and regardless in what happens of November of 28, because it's going to take real systemic change to stop the pattern that we are on. And I just don't know if we have people that are interested in actually engaging in that kind of activity. Old Lib says windfall taxes. I'm right there with you. I hope. I wish. But when Democrats had the House, the Senate, and the presidency back in 2022, Sanders proposed a windfall tax, and it couldn't even make it for a vote. We're expecting it to happen when conservatives are here looking how else they can cut billionaire taxes. It's absolutely unbelievable. I got to squeeze one more quick break in here. We'll have a short segment on the other side before we wrap up the show. Got a couple more thoughts piling in here, so we'll put a bow on this conversation before we get ready for Haley coming in. Everybody stay right where you are. If you want to take part, 920-281-1150, and we'll be back in a couple minutes. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. Celebrate May Beef Month with Nema's Southside Market and WHBY. It's your chance to win a quarter cow to stock your freezer. Head to WHBY.com to find the cow, tip the cow by clicking, and enter to win. Come back daily for more chances to win, as the cow will be grazing its way across the website throughout the month of May. It's time to go cow tipping with Nema's Southside Market and WHBY. Karen says, went to a local bar for dinner last night. Owner says if something doesn't give, pretty soon going to have to raise prices. Distributors raising his costs already. Is not going to be able to keep absorbing those costs. I think that's kind of a tale that everybody's exemplifying right now. I think a lot of people are kind of going through that moment, and it's a catch-22, right? Because we've been dealing with 45 years of wage stagnation, and we've all gotten kind of accustomed to being able to buy the cheapest crap imaginable. So then you flash forward to today. Not only are the quote-unquote cheap stores no longer providing cheap options available for American prices, but the mom and pops that were already known as charging you a little more, specifically because they don't have the capacity to buy in bulk like some of these larger operations do, are only going to see those prices go further up. And if you are one of those, and I count myself among them, who likes to shop local, pay more, but finds himself in an economic position to do so and feel like you're doing something to keep these small mom and pops open, it's eventually going to become a reality that a larger and larger percentage of people are not going to be in the position to be able to do anything about that. And as that population continues growing, you're going to see more of these places close up, which only fuels the fire further towards consolidation, monopolization efforts, and this price coordination. So it's going to take a concerted effort of buying habits from us, but also mixed with the silent hand of government that made sure to fight for the small guy back in the day, that has absolutely left them out to dry, regardless of who is in power. But you have to admit, it's pretty embarrassingly bad since Donald Trump took over in 2025. All right, guys, awesome interaction these days. Today, I should say. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the entire program, please do consider downloading the WHBY app. By the way, Justin says, meanwhile, I bet you Arizona tea is still heroically at 99 cents. You're absolutely right, and I couldn't agree with you more there. With that, guys, I have to get out of here. Download the WHBY app. If you've already done that, if you're a real hero, maybe consider checking out my TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook pages as well. Just search my name. It's Ben Cominos. Thank you for all the nice messages on TikTok. It's Ben Cominos, just Dominoes with a C. Look me up, and my channel pops up on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. So follow along if you haven't been already. Haley's going to be up next. I'm being told I have to do this 4 more times this week before I'm allowed to call it a week. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. Outside the box, WHBY.